So I've actually met all these panelists through a series of interviews I did last year, or I guess 6 months ago, not even last year, where I was just going after top data science freelancers on Upwork and trying to learn from them because I was just this, you know, very much noob. I'm still a noob in many ways, but even more of a noob 6 months ago. So I thought no better way than to learn from those ahead of me. So first person I want to introduce is Nick. Nick got his bachelor's degree in computer science from Cornell University, after which he went and he was at Lincoln Lab, MIT's Lincoln Lab, where he worked as a research scientist, which last time we interviewed Nick, I was commenting on how impressive that is because I don't see a whole lot of undergrads going into research roles like that. But at a certain point, I don't know, got fed up maybe, and he went on to um, greener pastures and got his PhD in computer science from University of California at Irvine. And then after that, he entered the world of freelance, where he started doing like data science and software engineering freelance work. So, welcome, Nick. Great to have you back speaking to the community.
Thanks for having me.
Next, I want to introduce Mateo. Mateo got his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, after which he held data science and data engineering roles at a few different companies. For one, he was at Capital One for a bit, then he was at LimeTree. But now Mateo's made the transition from being a data freelancer to being a financial planner, specializing in helping freelancers kind of stay on track with their finances and whatnot. So super excited to have Mateo here to have learn more about his journey and perspective on all this stuff. Thanks, Mateo.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And then finally, we've got Dimitri, who got his bachelor's degree in business administration and marketing, and then he got a master's of science in business analytics and computer science from UCL. Dimitri, remind me what UCL is.
University College London.
Of North London. Yeah, very cool. And then Dimitri has been he's a seasoned veteran freelancer. I met him on Upwork, super successful there, and a super successful freelancing business. But now Dimitri started a kind of new I don't know what to call it, but like venture with the datafreelancer.com, where he's imparting all of his wisdom that he's learned in his years freelancing for other people that are trying to break into the space. So that's a great resource for anyone that is kind of new to this whole world. Highly recommend that. So thanks for being here, Dimitri.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so with all the impressive resumes out of the way, we'll just kind of jump into the discussion here. So one of the things that we've noticed, or at least I've noticed since like COVID, there was this whole thing called the Great Resignation, where people were leaving their corporate roles and more people were going into freelance maybe or doing some other kind of work. And even now we have these huge companies like the infamous tech layoffs that we're seeing these days, where people are moving, kind of not by choice, but they're leaving these full-time roles. And I just kind of want to get everyone's perspective on like what you guys see the future of freelance being. Do you guys see this as like a blip, like this kind of fad where people were freelancing because it's cool and fun, remote work during COVID, or people are kind of forced into freelance because of a layoff, and then in like 4 or 5 years we'll be back to normal where everyone's working a full-time corporate job again? Or do you see this as like indicative of a more fundamental shift in how people work, and we're gonna and that we're going to be seeing more like one-person companies? We're going to see a rise in freelancing in the future of work. So I just want to throw it out there. Anyone who kind of wants to catch that and kick us off, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. Yeah, so I think it's like really a question of like what role freelancing fills, and like a lot of the clients I've gotten in the past year have been like startups or like very small businesses that they may have some VC funding or something like that, and they don't really want to hire someone full time. They want to hire someone for like 20 or 30 hours a week. And I think it's also easier for them to the remote aspect where it's like I think a lot of people are not going to move to some random city to work with a startup that they don't know the founder, how reliable it is. Plus, it's like a city that has a lot of other stuff around it. So I think for a lot of like startups, it might be very helpful. And then regarding the individual aspect, that's one thing I've noticed recently as I've taken larger projects or just in general is I think it's difficult for clients to see like what like data science and machine learning is and like kind of where the boundaries are between like managing a project and like what the data scientist should be doing or what some other like coder should be doing. And I think it's more like what I'm trying to switch into is like building small teams. So I think like the individual idea is difficult, and like if I didn't have kind of a background, a strong enough background, it would be hard for me to work individually. But I think even just in general, having at least small teams or communities like this is going to be the way that this goes in the future.
Yeah, I like that you said like it's flexible for both sides. It's flexible for the business and the startup or whatever it might be, but it's also flexible for the contributors. They can have multiple clients or they don't have to, pick up their whole life and move to a city for a job. So yeah, those are really good points.
Add something to that as well.
Mhm.
And especially what COVID has done to the whole industry, I think was before that lots of companies were basically all wanted to have their employees on site, and very few were kind of like the pioneers that were leading this whole remote industry. And therefore, I think before, when companies were only trusting their employees when they were in-house, and they also often wanted to have the consultants to come over to be in-house. Now, after COVID, they trust their employees. They see that work is going. So I feel like now, even more than before, they are way open to work with not only, let's say, with foreign entities, other freelancers that are not basically on site and basically provide their service remote.
Yeah,
Okay,
for sure. Oh, go ahead, Mateo.
just say that I'm curious, like where the steady state will be. Will be like 30% of people freelance, less, more, because there's certain personality types that I think are drawn to it. Some are completely scared off of it too, um, and I think the small teams point is good too because that makes it a little bit more stable, helps people get into it, and I totally agree that people are much more comfortable with it, but they're still, you hear about all these CEOs back to office. My friends at Apple that are like, oh, I got to go back to work now. This sucks. And maybe it'll take a little bit more time for more flexible people to get up there. Because I think it's a great way of working, even, if you could hand something off to someone in another time zone, pick it up in the morning, that type of thing is also really cool. But yeah, I'm not sure that it would work for everyone, but I think everyone should consider it because I like it a lot.
Do you guys think that we need more freelancers? Or do you think we have too many freelancers, or it doesn't really matter? Like whatever the market decides is best.
I wish more managers were okay with freelancers or
Mm.
didn't have weird contracts that they want every freelancer to sign. And then you read it, it's like, no, I'm not signing this and stuff like that. I wish it was a little bit more, and I feel like certain companies, they look at you like a contractor, not like a trusted advisor, someone to actually listen to. Some people just want to dictate work to you, and that doesn't always work the best. That's sort of a different type of freelancing. So
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know.
so kind of digging into that a bit more, like I think this is one thing that, people who haven't done freelancing before, like it's like a black swan. It's like something they don't even know is a potential problem, but like contracts from employers that have undesirable terms in there. So like what are some examples of like things that you would see in a contract and immediately be like, no, like that doesn't work for me, or that's a deal breaker, or maybe even just like a red flag.
Um, I'll start too on this one.
Yeah.
I guess like choice of venue, people want to sue you in their little city in the middle of nowhere, and that's sort of like odd. And they have like giant liability risks that they want you to take ownership of when it's like, look, I'm using open source technologies. I guess I can buy insurance, but beyond that, I don't want to be totally liable for things. So there's that. And then there's stuff where it's like clear that they didn't even consider your case. They're like, none of this data shall leave the office, but you're a remote worker. So just like little things like that. It's not even a red
Yeah.
flag, but just like let's talk about this. But
Mm.
and then some people, I had one client from another industry once. I guess in construction it's more common, but he had a lot of penalties and very strict on like the overages or this or that, or it was very much like we think this is something that is totally scoped out and not something that could be, different once you see the data. So tell me it's going to be 95% accurate. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, work with me a little bit, or at least give me some time to give you a better ballpark by paying me to work first. Like, so that type of stuff, like too rigid, I guess. I don't know. Curious what
Yeah.
other people think too.
It seemed like you were gonna say something earlier, Nick.
Yeah, so it's not about the contracts as much as like the ecosystem of freelancers. So I had said I think having the small teams is like the way to go, and that's kind of what I'm trying to transition to. But also I think in terms of like the market is like a lot of people don't know what they need, and like a lot of times, like I get a lot of clients through consulting calls. It's like they may come to you and say like we have a LLM chatbot problem, and it's just like that's just like the only like AI that they know, and then you start talking to them, and it's like really a more standard data analysis problem, or
Mm-hmm.
they think they have some machine learning problem, and it's not even a machine learning problem, that you don't need to use those tools. So I think, um, I guess my impression is there's a lot of problems and a lot of like desire out there for these skills, but they don't know how to match them. So I think even like having someone to scope out their projects and facilitate like matching them with freelancers and deciding exactly what they need is something that's missing right now.
Yeah, I see that. And this kind of goes into what you were doing, Dimitri, with like data strategy.
Yes, and that's what I just want to say. Is when I started, I mean, my background, I mean, I always work with marketing teams. So always, when I started freelancing, I always positioned myself as the marketing data scientist, and I always try to focus on marketing data projects. But as Nick just said, it's I think very common that lots of people are not educated on the different data projects, the different data problems out there. So I basically saw this, and when I talked to many, let's say, prospects, because at the end they didn't turn into clients, and because this was always the case, because they thought they needed something, but they needed something else. It was still data related, but for them it's just they have this cloud of data in their head, and that's why I decided to basically, as I have this background in business, basically to go a little bit back and educate those companies around that and basically do the project scoping with them, understand what do they actually need. Because nowadays, every company wants to be data driven. They often don't actually know what it means. I mean, even if we ask each other, we probably all have different definitions for it or different understandings of it. And the whole thing is that I see too many clients that invest, at least in the marketing side, they want to have some data pipelines, they want to have some dashboards. That's usually the case, the main project that they always think about, some marketing dashboard. And then what? How do you use the dashboard? How do you? What are all the next steps? And yeah, so basically that's why I moved out into the more data strategy consulting.
Yeah, those were always my best contracts, were when I knew the client thought they needed something and I could really convince them that this is what they actually needed. I'm the expert, because you come in with so much more trust. But then I'm sure, focusing more on that, which is kind of what I want to do more too, or did want to do at a time, and now I've sort of transitioned more to financial planning. But that's like the funnest part for me. I think what maybe you're trying to do more of, Nick, too, and Dimitri as well. Yeah.
And I love that you guys brought this up because we all met in my first round of interviews on Upwork, but I actually recently did a second round of interviews. And one of the things that came up over and over again is that a common mistake that a lot of freelancers will make early on is that they don't get that clarity of scope at the outset. And now you're like throwing that in with clients don't really know what they want. And, you might be coming in with all this like technical knowledge, or maybe they heard all these buzzwords and you're trying to like close the gap between like what they need and what they think they need. So I don't know, how do you guys navigate that at the outset, like when working with prospects, like not even clients yet, but how do you guide that conversation?
I guess I'll say something on that. So I think that that's actually a huge problem. Is that kind of like I was saying before? Is like I feel like they're trying to manage you. Like sometimes they think like they're the project manager. It's not like I haven't had anyone like kind of boss you around, be like, oh no, you shouldn't be doing this. Like you should be doing it this way. Like they'll work with you, but I still feel like they try to do more than they're capable of doing, and it's like they kind of tell you a little bit about the project, and they might tell you some vague things about like, oh, like we're going to use this for this, and don't worry about that. And then once you actually get to that, it's like this completely didn't work, and I should have done something different earlier on. And they just want a deliverable like pretty immediately. So I think that as I switch to do more like advisory or like project scoping and like management, it's just going to be easier to facilitate because it's like they don't know that like that's a job, that like to have a clear scope and like clear requirements and clear like checkpoints, like especially about the data, because it's like with coding it's like you can get a bug and it just doesn't work, but with data it's like you have a pipeline and it's putting data through the pipeline, it's going to the next stages, but unless you're putting in the right checks and looking at it and analyzing it, uh you don't really know what's happening in the middle, and it doesn't throw an error. So it's like to them, they don't really understand like how big of an issue that is. So I think it's like the way I'm thinking now is like if I were like the manager, it's like my job is to make this scope like clear, and like that's my job, and then the other guy is going to do the coding. So like from their perspective, like that's how it would look. And it's like I think now it's like as a one person team, they're like, oh, we just kind of vaguely tell you and then you code it up. So I think having like an actual physical person that's like the guy who makes the scope and the specifications would make it easier for them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, I, you know, I was definitely guilty of this as like, coming from like a senior data scientist role, just like a data scientist role. You have a certain mindset. You're not really thinking like a project manager. You're not thinking like a manager. You're just thinking about the technology. And so it's easy to kind of jump into the project with like tools first and not really making a plan. And so like making that distinction in your mind between, well, there's this like technical role, there's like the data scientist role, but then there's also the project manager role, and giving both like the proper amount of attention and time. I don't know, Dimitri, how was that conversation typically gone for you? Like since you were doing more of like the project manager role when working with clients.
I started again with the at least let's say the former leads companies that I knew that they had a data problem, but at the past I always basically passed them on to like, no, that's not what I do. And I reached out back to them and um, tried to basically reignite the conversation and ask them, do you still have that data problem? And then they sometimes say like, yes, I do it. And then I tell them like, and then basically I come in with my service offering where I basically say, I'll try to help you gain clarity. We scope the project. You have me as a data person helping you finding out what type of data person you actually need for that. And yeah, and often for them, that's such a big relief because again, often it's someone higher up in the food chain basically told them that they should do that, and now they don't know how to get it done, and they just need someone, but they often don't know who. That's why they went on maybe different platforms, or they reach out to their network and ask, "Do you know a data guy?" And that's usually how the conversation works.
Yeah, and another thing that I've been, because this is like my world now. Like this past couple months, like I've really gone all in on freelancing, and this project manager stuff and client relations stuff has really like slapped me in the face in many ways. And so I'm curious, what like when you guys are doing that first engagement, like talking to a prospect, like they said they have some problem, they reached out to you, or you found them through Upwork or whatever means. Like what are you asking these clients to kind of dig in, peel back the layers of the onion to get to like the core like problem that they're facing, and ultimately like solving the problem they actually have as opposed to the problem that they might think that they have?
So I'll start.
So in my case,
Oh, go ahead. You go ahead. Dimitri.
oh, sorry. In my case, I have like my little checklist of questions that I always try to go through because otherwise I'm a very chatty person and I get lost in conversation with them. And I basically what I try is ask very open question about what's on their mind, what types of problem they have. I try to let them explain it to me, what they think is the problem, And every time I kind of smell something, I try to steer the conversation. In that regard, I ask them, how can I help you? So I try to let them be basically the doctor in that case and like self-diagnose themselves. But in that process, basically, my questions basically give me enough input to understand, okay, should I ask this question or this question? So for me, it's very important to ask open-end questions. Let them basically tell me as much as they know. And at the end, my goal is out of all this, basically after I ask them a bunch of questions, open-end questions, is to understand what they don't know. And that's where I try to land my key question. And my key question is always like, again, I ask them a specific thing that I pointed out that they clearly don't know about it, and I ask them, and I keep following up on that, and that makes them um, unsure, because oftentimes it's some sort of manager that they talk to another basically freelancer that wants to sell to them, and I try to switch that whole conversation, that it's more like I'm asking you a question that you don't know, so suddenly you switch and you start listening to me when I say something, because you clearly don't know. So yeah, that's usually the process how I start the initial phase.
I think that's a fantastic way to do it. It's like you're learning from them, they're teaching you, and you're allowing them to drive the conversation and just maybe nudging it in particular directions, to kind of get a deeper understanding of what their problem is. Mateo, you were going to say something, but yeah,
Yeah, no, good.
what do you got?
Yeah, sure. I guess based on what Dimitri said, sort of changed what I say now. But yeah, earlier in my career, with Upwork and things, you send a lot of proposals and you're like, what are you doing? You're not closing as much. Maybe you're focusing on too many types of jobs and not niching enough. But I read some sales books and things and more thinking about like the client psychology of it, like Dimitri's saying, getting them to talk and be their own doctor is kind of interesting. Because I found if you sort of get them to make the jump to the point where they really need to hire you by sort of not going too fast with trying to sell them, but not going too slow either, and trying to really understand why they are hiring you. What are they hoping to achieve from this relationship? And then you want to make sure they're confident enough. You don't want to have unsuccessful clients, I would hope. And trying to be more specific here. Just trying to really understand all the things they might be missing because, like Dimitri was saying, they might hear about some technology. So I work a lot with PDFs, and people are like, "Oh, I just use Tesseract and this." I'm like, "Well, you have a PDF. All the data's in it already potentially, and you have a lot of OCR issues if you use Tesseract. And if I tell the client that specific insight, then they're like, "Oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about," and that builds confidence, and then you can slowly build into their specific problem. But again, not going too fast, but going to the point where like you should hire me. I'll do an exploration. I'll show you my method works quickly. Here's the deliverables, and then that can lead into the longer work. And hopefully, at that point, they have enough confidence in you that they'll listen to you and hire you for that. But being a solo too, it's kind of hard to. I'm a bit of a generalist with some specialists, like maybe like the T shape, as people say, but they don't want to listen to you on too much other stuff. They sort of want a guy for this, a guy for that, or consultant for that, and it's hard to really demonstrate expertise, in my opinion, without being a little bit more formal. And that's something I think I've struggled with too. If you're more formally a project manager, more formally a team, they might trust on you a bit more and get you to listen to you on actually solving the real problems too.
Yeah, and I'll add to that that I think like the initial consultation is important for talking with the client, and I think from their perspective, like if you're talking about the problem and you give them good ideas and you're asking good questions, like that's what kind of gets them to hire you. And I think most of the like larger contracts I've had have started off as like 10 hours a week or like a small amount. So I think they kind of like hire you, so they're kind of testing you, but also like understanding like what their problem is. And then it's always been like, oh, like we like what you're doing, like we want to see more done this week. Like here's like another 10 hours, and like, oh, now we want more done. So it's like it's kind of like ramped up. But I think also for me, what's helped me keep clients and has like kind of helped manage their expectations is like to show them like the data analysis a little bit and to make videos. Like I make a 10 or 15-minute video every week showing like this is the results I'm getting, like this is what the code looks like, or maybe not so much the code, but like these are what the plots look like, this is what the data looks like. And if there would be like a good classification for this data, we would see like if we make like 2D plots, we would see like separation between these two classes, and like we're not seeing that, and therefore like this needs to be rethought in some way. So I think yeah, it's just like it's kind of their first experience, like really getting in with data and seeing all the problems that can arise. So if they see that happening, they're I think more willing to work with you. But I guess they're not really transparent. It's like I can see it from their end, like they don't want to just dump like tens of thousands of dollars off and hope that eventually something's going to work without seeing why it's not working or why it's taking time or the whole process.
I was gonna say something, but I think I forgot. But we are kind of like running a little over time, so I just want to ask one more question to the panel, and we'll open it up for the Q&A. And so, what's like the long-term play? Like, what does a long-term career look like as a freelancer? Because like in corporate, it's a pretty well-paved path. You kind of get in and you just kind of keep climbing the ranks. You go from, individual contributor to like a manager to like a director and so on and so forth. But in freelance, it's not so clear. And I often see, different freelancers with different visions for themselves. So I'm just curious to kind of see what everyone's vision here is for themselves. Like, what's the long-term goal? Like, what are you hoping to get out of this like data freelancing career?
So I guess I'll start. So I said this kind of at the last interview that so kind of ramping up and being successful was my goal the past few years, and I think now trying to do more teamwork is going to be like next year or two, and then also having worked with like dozens or of like startups and small businesses, just seeing what it takes to build a startup. So I'm more ambitious to do that right now. So do my own projects, and that's kind of why I liked freelancing. Is that if I wanted to cut the hours down to like 20 a week and then work on my own projects, that's something that I could do. Whereas like if you have a 40-hour week job, you can't just tell them like I want to work 20 hours a week for the next 2 months. Um, so working on my own projects and the Substack writing projects that I'm working on, that's kind of my long-term goals.
What about you, Mateo?
Yeah, so for me, something I wrestled with a lot was like, should I start a consulting company, hire people, and do that? And I don't know. I really like the, it's hard to finesse your clients just right, but to get it to a point where nothing's too urgent that you're needed next day or hopefully within a week, ideally, and then really having like ultimate flexibility. But then maintaining that is hard because you got to still stay sharp. You can't get too comfortable with your clients. So, I think my path has been, I guess I'm still doing freelancing, but in financial planning. And I think there's a lot of interesting things I can do there. But long term, I do like doing service work. It's one of the most successful things. I've always been doing things for providing projects someone wants and being done like kind of as a mercenary and probably still doing that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still doing startup stuff. But for me, it just sort of, as a freelancer, you can really make a lot of money with hourly rates and project-based billing and have that flexibility to not always work all the time. And that's what really I'm trying to do. If I can just keep bumping up the hourly rate, in my opinion, I feel like some of the computer stuff's gotten a little bit more complex to start charging high rates. So, I guess really not switching to another industry. I think if I have the expertise, I can do it pretty well with. And then be more flexible to do other random ventures, like who knows, make the terrible financial decision to open a restaurant or something. But yeah.
I'd eat there. And Vegas is popping for restaurants,
Yeah,
so you're in the
yeah.
right city.
Thanks. Hopefully not too much
Uh,
competition.
what about you, Dimitri?
I think Matteo, his last point was something that kind of defines the whole freelancer spirit. And I mean, you wear the hat, the data entrepreneur, and I think that's the beauty. We all have a skill set, and we like to basically provide our services, but it doesn't mean that your career is defined by just that service, because as a freelancer, you don't just do that one thing that you were hired as in a company, but you do sales, you do marketing, you do so much stuff. Suddenly, maybe you want to build your own website, you start figuring out so many new interests that you had before. And again, it might be out of the data world, it might be a different one. Again, it could be anything. And I think that's the beauty of it, that it provides you with the freedom of really trying out different stuff. And as soon as no, as long as you found basically that one thing that basically gives you, let's say, enough, let's say, money to support your life and be happy. Once you figure that out, you have enough time to experiment other things. Again, you could just work out more in the gym, or you can try out new ventures, do the restaurant thing, or any other stuff. And that, I think that's the beauty of it.
So what's that going to look like for you? Is it going to be the datafreelancer.com? Is it going to be just more consulting? Is it going to be something else entirely?
No, I mean, again, I went to data consulting and advisory just because I think I'm not the best data scientist, and by far, I mean, I see too many people out there that I cannot compete with, and I don't want to provide some shitty service to my client just because they know me. And again, I enjoy the strategy side of it, and not that much the implementation side. So for me, definitely the data strategy is the long-term plan.
Yeah.
And in terms of the data freelancer, again, right now it's just let's say a side project. Again, I like to share. I'm a mentor also at two universities, so I have that thing where I really enjoy being part of the like this panel here. And if again my advice helps someone, then hey, I'm happy. So at the moment it's just again fun, but hey, again that's the entrepreneurship the hat that you wear, and maybe maybe I can monetize that. But again,
Yeah.
it's not the goal for the beginning.
That's awesome. All right, let's open it up for questions. So if you guys got questions, drop it in the chat, raise your hand, we'll put you up on stage. We've have a tremendous amount of experience on the stage here. Very successful freelancers, at least as far as I can tell from Upwork revenue. Probably cumulative over $1 million in revenue just on Upwork. So this is you know, this is your opportunity to learn. All right, here we go. Sam has a question. Come on up, Sam.
There we go. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. It's been a good chat. I've enjoyed listening to y'all. One of the things I've been thinking about recently, I just kind of kicked off this journey a couple months ago in the consulting freelancing world, and I'm currently on an hourly project with a consulting firm with an end client. So the question here is mostly like thinking about long term, right? How do you build out that incoming funnel? So I would call myself right now a contractor, but I want to move into that consulting space. So how do you build out that funnel to start to get incoming business, or at least make that first conversation, right, with a potential client less painful? So I've been reading things like you shouldn't do anything else other than just write articles and write books, and that should be the only thing you do to kind of prove out your experience and knowledge. But I see other people, right, that have YouTube channels and have Instagram channels that create reels, so reels. So I'm just thinking like, what has been y'all's strategy and kind of the proven strategy that you've used in your experience to build out that incoming funnel and be able to prove out your experience and make those conversations less painful?
Yeah, I would say for me, working on Upwork, getting reviews, like the first 5 or 6 reviews, after you get that, you're pretty much validated in the eyes of a lot of clients. So just like take whatever jobs you need to get that, and preferably like shorter jobs that are easy that you can do in like a day, ideally, that you could complete it, get a good review, and that helps a lot of clients. So that's been my experience on that platform.
I'd also say with Upwork, a cool thing you can do is, you have your existing contract right now, your skill set. You can look on Upwork to see who gets jobs by just storing the job ID. I think it still works. Maybe you do that already. And, you can see who gets it, what their background is, and try to match your skill path to that. But another thing with freelancing, to get more of the funnel, I haven't done the best in this area, but I'm trying more now. Like word of mouth, even being here, looking at the job board, getting that first touch with the person, like actually talking to a human, being able to get in front of them and understand the problem. I think that's really important too. Just the word of mouth, however you can do it, will help you get the referrals.
My side, my main strategy from the beginning was relationships and therefore getting referral. And I did that by, when I started out, I reached out to almost every colleague I had over the past. I told them that what I was doing. I told them if someone needs help with data, I'm the data guy for them. Once I got some clients through Upwork, off Upwork, doesn't matter. I try to mingle with them a lot, try to be kind of like had a friendly relationship with them. So far that even nowadays I try to reach out to them once in a while. I even try. I even send most of them Christmas cards. Again, I just try to the relationship side because I feel like yeah, I probably there are tons of ways of getting inbound clients. But I mean, it takes time to write good articles, get SEO, get traffic, and all that stuff. For me, it's I talk to people right away. It's so much faster. So that was always my strategy.
I'll just add one thing on the funnel side. Yeah, I'll make it quick. So actually all my clients right now and leads are coming from inbound leads from my YouTube videos and my Medium articles. And that, you know, it has its pros and cons as well. But I don't think so I guess the one thing about that is it takes time. I've been making content for 3 years, and so it's kind of like 3 years in the making. I'm getting leads from articles I wrote 2 years ago, so it's not something that's going to get you the immediate return on investment. Probably Upwork is going to get you more immediate results, and then probably referrals. So I guess there's something to be said about diversifying how you get leads. Of course, that's not necessary because everyone here has not diversified and found a way to be successful. Sorry, Mateo, what were you going to say?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Just that SEO, that stuff, that's the long game. It can work out really well, I think, but it's, potentially years to see the return unless you get viral somehow. But yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Let's see. All right, so we had another question from Lori. I guess we kind of touched on it, but does anyone have experience in freelancing on Upwork and would like to share? So I don't know, Nick, Mateo, Dimitri, if you guys want to add any color from the earlier comments.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say that I chose that platform because it seemed to be the one that had the most jobs and like at least decent length contracts. Like I think stuff like Fiverr is just more like one-off. And then there's other ones that are like Top Tal that you had to apply to get into. And I guess I looked at that a few years ago and I didn't do it because it looked like it needed like a 3-week like trial project and I didn't want to spend that time to get in there and I didn't know like what the clients were like in there and all the other stuff. So I guess I just didn't do it and Upwork was successful for me, so I stuck with that. But I don't know if other people have success on other platforms. That would be good to find out.
Mateo, I know you are super successful in Upwork as well. I don't know, any kind of reflections, maybe tips for those that might be earlier in their Upwork journey?
I think finding a niche is a good idea. And I think what we said earlier about maybe matching your profile to, like, you get 5 jobs and that shows you credibility if you get those 5 jobs and something you want to specialize in, that's helpful. Some things, maybe if you look at your preferred work-life balance, maybe that's not the right type of job. Some full stack roles, in my experience, want more hours per week than like a data science job, for instance. But yeah, really, once I started niching, I applied to things less and I closed more in aggregate. So trying out different niches, you can even have like 3 per se, but I think Upwork lets you show your profile differently too, based on your niches, and start exploring that way. Would be a good way to go, make it more tangible, but you also have to be critical with yourself. Don't think you can do something and then like you're not a neural network expert or something without, some more pedigree probably. So that's a trickier one. But a reflection, iterating.
Just one last thing to that, because yesterday or the other day I was basically making a video right about basically the market dynamics of basically the data freelance scape. And again, everyone talks about niching, and I think niching, if you find that niche, you're able to command higher prices and probably have a very good positioning towards the clients that you like to attract. However, there are tons of people out there that also want to be freelancers, and maybe they're more junior. They don't, or they have worked on very different data projects, so they don't know exactly what their niche is. And I don't want to discourage those people and think that even a generalist approach can work. But again, you need to have your strategy. You need to know that if you're, for example, very good in Python or Excel or any other tool out there, and you know that people are asked for this skill, you might at the beginning, as Nick said, to get the first wins basically on Upwork, compete on price and go very low. Maybe there are other ways how you can get those projects. Promise the client, I don't know, deliver on a specific time frame, guarantees. I don't know. There are so many other things that clients want, and even as a generalist, you can level up the price depending on how you basically sell your value. And your value is not just your Python skill, but it's your communication. It's the promises. It's so much more.
Yeah, those are really good points. We had another question from Chris. I'll just read the whole thing aloud. I recently heard of some design freelancers slash solopreneurs who would productize their services, charging on a tiered subscription basis. Would you think this is something that we can do in the data field? And then they linked a reference video.
I know that video. I've seen that, and I also know a guy on LinkedIn that has a productized data service, and it looks the same thing. Like if you're not familiar, watch this video that Chris just posted. But there's someone on LinkedIn, a guy from Austria. I don't remember his name right now. And he basically has this basically built a service around that. How good that works, I don't know. But again, there are so many ways of doing business, and if you think that style works for you, why not?
And I think I once considered doing this because I went to a bike shop and they were selling me on tuning my bike, and they're like, here's the light package, the medium, and the big. And I think for certain things where you know what you're doing, that can be a good way to frame. And also with the price psychology, like you don't want this, you don't want that. You can kind of manipulate it with data. Maybe on like training models, you could do a light version, and then like the more advanced is using like a lot more training time or GPUs. But I think with productized services, it helps if you really know how much they do cost, or you have some runway to get an idea for that. Because once you know your margins, then it's great. But I think also just in the contract terms, if you give people options, that's another way to close the sale. That's a little interesting, I think.
Just to put one more on top of the fake, just because I feel like sometimes those videos they are made in a way that when I watch them, I think like, wow, that's very cool, very smart idea. But again, it doesn't mean that that's the best way of making money, because, for example, how this basically business model works is you get paid a flat fee over like a subscription from the clients, but you basically promise them to do one work at a time. So that's why they cannot overload you with work. So in the case if you are on some projects slower because you cannot always estimate the type of projects they give you, you cannot really define it for them. And again, you might be slow. You could have done so much more other projects and actually earn more. On the other side, it sounds like a very, let's say, people fall in love with the subscription model. So some people think that's the only way it goes. I mean, Netflix and all those big companies do that. But again, it really needs to fit your style, the way you work, your client, your positioning, your marketing. So there's so much behind that. But again, if you watch the video, I mean, it sounds cool and everyone thinks that's the way to go.
So we got one, maybe two more questions. So one is from Samara. When starting as a data freelancer, does it depend on a certain skill / tool to build your portfolio? So I guess if I'm interpreting this correctly, do you need like a particular set of skills to get started in this industry?
I think instead of focusing on skills, focus on what you can do, which is slightly different from a skill. Because in freelancing, people are less concerned, like when you apply to a normal job, it's like, what's your resume? Where have you learned? What can we teach you? Whereas with freelancers, sometimes they're looking for you to do something they know you can do. But trying to think on a depend on a certain skill. Yeah, I mean, there's certain skills and tools that are in demand and all that, and there can be some research done to figure out what best suits you. But I think it's more about just really focus on the results, and then the skill will, come from that. Like learning the coolest programming language or library may not be as necessary unless maybe you're in the front end space or something. But yeah, I'd focus on what you can do more. Like Excel is a fine tool, even, it works for a lot of companies, even though it's not as advanced. You could do quite a lot of things just with that.
Any other thoughts? We got one question here and maybe one more incoming. Want to make sure we get to all the questions. All right, let's see. There's another one. Pringleman said, "Thanks a lot for the session. Any tips for keeping yourself motivated when starting out? In the beginning, it can be hard to find the first few clients and projects." I think this is a very relatable question.
I see Nick leaning forward.
Okay, yeah, I guess. I mean, I think I told you my story was I finished PhD and then I like did not want to work for big tech or academia because of the culture there. And basically my motivation was just to survive financially. So make enough to live. So I had like probably a lower standard than people would have if they're coming in with like a standard data science job and they expect to make that salary with 40 hours a week right off the bat. So I guess my standards were lower than other people's, but I guess that was my motivation, was I just did not want to work for these companies and these institutions, and if I could survive financially, then I was very motivated to do that. And so I think I don't know, maybe to generalize it, just like find what motivates you and what your goals are, and to not really expect maybe in the first year that you're gonna eclipse if you have a current salary, and just be satisfied with that.
So have realistic expectations, and survival is the best motivator. That was my takeaway from that.
That was for me, yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's also I'll add on to that like a community like this wasn't around like a few years ago, so I think having community of people that you could work with and even like share tips and to kind of like work together and struggle together with, I think is very useful.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. And then also, for me, what was helpful is like, even while you're building your profile, like you're making way less than you hope to make in the future. Zooming out and looking at the big picture, like, okay, I got this job. That means I have a much better chance of getting this job, which means after that I can get this job. And doing that from time to time helped. But there's definitely some low points freelancing where it's like, will you get that next stepping stone, so to speak, to get the experience, to get the jobs that you want? But yeah, say the big picture helped me a lot.
Like you're building
On my
towards
side,
something. Oh yeah, go ahead, Dimitri.
from my side, it's, I think, probably a business answer, and I would say have a purpose, because when I started out, I worked 7 years for different companies before, and I think I was always a tough employee sometimes, because I often wasn't happy how people use data or the type of projects we worked. And I also worked before for Google partner consulting firm, and sometimes we sold projects to clients, and I was like, man, that's total bullshit to the client. And I always thought, if I would be my own business, I want to work on stuff that really helps people. And that was kind of, let's say, my guiding star. Of course, survival and the financial part is critical for that. But I told myself, every project I will do, I will become the friend to my clients. I will try to advise them as I would advise my mother, basically. And yeah, so that was my motivator.
All right, awesome. We went over a little bit, but I didn't want to cut off the great conversations and all the questions that we received. So we'll probably cut it off there. If you guys have any follow-up questions, feel free to DM me and I'll share it with the panelists, or feel free to reach out to the panelists on LinkedIn, or however you'd like to contact them. So with that, we are going to share the recording in the past events channel and on the YouTube channel. So if you can continue the interactions and engagements there. I also want to call out our next event, which will actually be on Thursday. And this is going to be kind of a new experimental type of event. We're calling it a huddle. So basically, we're all going to get into the voice channel, and it's just going to be an open forum. Anyone can come in and kind of join the conversation. So maybe you can think of it as like a panel discussion, but open to everyone. So anyone can kind of share their perspective or share what problems they're facing right now, and then you get feedback from other people, other freelancers, other entrepreneurs, whatever it is. Okay, let's see. So Sam's going to be there Thursday. Thank you, Sam. Can we send the recording link on the email? So you should get a follow-up email if you registered on Luma for the event. And then there should be a link to the YouTube channel. So if you go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, or just kind of keep your eyes open, in the next few days we'll upload the recording there. Let's see. Yeah, and with that, I want to thank the incredible panelists for taking the time on a Saturday to be part of this event, sharing their insights with the community, and then thank you all to the audience that joined and with all the amazing questions. So thanks, guys, and we'll see you in the next event.